Well, hello. Today's the classic 1939 Western Stagecoach. A stagecoach is going from Tonto, Arizona to Lordsburg, New Mexico. On board are a cross-section of society. A prostitute being run out of town. A drunk doctor who also seems to be being run out of town too. The bank president who's embezzling money. There's a young pregnant woman going to visit her husband who's in the army, and a gambler who accompanies her, and a whiskey salesman. The marshal rides shotgun because he heard the Ringo Kid had broken out of prison and was heading to Lordsburg. They meet him along the way, and the marshal, of course, takes him into custody. The cavalry detachment that was assigned to them leaves them at their first stop, and they have to decide if they want to go on or not, which they do. At the second stop, the pregnant woman goes into labor, and they see Apache smoke signals in the distance, knowing that they're on the way. They manage to rig up the stagecoach to cross the river after they find they're burned by the Apaches. And they're attacked by the Apaches, but are saved at the last moment by the arrival of the cavalry. The Ringo Kid then confronts the Plummer brothers and gets revenge for the murder of his father and brother. So this is a 1939 movie, and it was based on a short story that appeared in a pulp magazine called The Stage to Lordsburg. And of course it was done by John Ford and starred John Wayne. And at the time they were both, kind of pretty much known as just B-movie director and actor. They weren't a very big name. And, the major studios didn't really want to do this movie. They didn't have any faith in it. You have to know at that time, Westerns were really considered just plain B movies. And, the director, John Ford, he was a, very accomplished director, did a lot, and even in the silent era, he did films. But, he wasn't a big name, but he really believed in this project and managed to get some, investors to back over $500,000 into this picture. And it proved a big success. It made $1.1 million and made, a pretty tidy profit for the investors. It's amazing you got John Wayne, because this is really also his big, debut that made him a star. Before that, he was pretty much an unknown. One of the big investors wanted to have Gary Cooper and Marlene Dietrich star in this because they wanted more big names for his money. But John Ford stood firm on this and wanted Wayne, and I think it really paid off because that really brought both their careers up. This movie was nominated for 7 Oscars, and it won one for Best Supporting Actor and one for Scoring. And, it was also shot in Monument Valley, which is, very iconic now for Westerns and became very iconic for many of John Ford's movies. And that was kind of a new thing at the time because, most studios preferred them to just film on their studio lots because they had all these nice elaborate sets and that. But he actually, filmed on location, and he also formed a really strong relationship with the Navajo tribe. He gave them, he employed a lot of them, because they were pretty much starving at the time. It was very poor there, and he's got a lot of respect for them. Was kind of adapted into the tribe, and he used them in many of his other movies, and you could see that, that gives it a real kind of realistic look because, he's really using real Native Americans there. They're not phony. They look quite real. And this is a interesting movie. I mean, it says its own little. It's probably considered one of the most classic movies of westerns. It's Orson Welles, when he wanted to learn how to make films, he wanted to find the best movie made, and he watched this movie like 40 times before he made Citizen Kane. And it's a really well thought movie. It's a fascinating movie. I loved it. It has a real kind of social commentary there. You had the prostitute and Wayne on one side, and then this kind of snobby, you know, wife who was pregnant, and had this aristocratic Southern gambler who decided to tag along because he served in the father's regiment during the Civil War. And there's, of course, the drunk doctor and this timid little whiskey salesman who the drunk doctor seems to bully into giving him all his whiskey. And it was a great movie. It had a lot of interesting conversations. And of course, they had the evil bank president who, in the 30s, banks weren't really considered very popular. And I don't even think they're popular nowadays either. And, it was an enjoyable movie. I think it's very classic. I had last review was kind of a very mediocre Western. This is a very good Western. If you want to watch a Western, I would definitely start here. And if you stuck with me this long, I thank you. You're a unique individual.